Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
Hey, great to have you with us as we welcome everyone back. Today's show brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury, Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. All right, so let's get to it. Time now for our play-by-play call of the day.
Cody Martin gets a screen. Cody with 7 seconds. Got to go. Cody a 3 for the lead. Got it. Cody gives Nevada a 1-point lead. 3.6 seconds to go. 72-71 Nevada.
I actually watched a chunk of that game last night because I really had not had a big chance to watch Nevada play. 5 senior starters, including Martin, is a really good three-point shooter. And they've done a really good job there of getting the transfers to play really well together. And that's where they're having success. And Musselman's done a great job with them. They played at Boise last night. It's always been one of your goals, Sean, to broadcast a Boise game. So,
yeah, the only difference is, no blue court last night.
No blue court.
No blue
in
court.
fact, it's funny because Kevin Kugler and I were talking this afternoon.
Cougs.
About for whatever reason, Kevin Fellow's name came up. Kevin played basketball here for Ed DeChellis years ago, and Ed, I think he's the only player Penn State's ever had from Idaho. And so he said, gee, I wonder what he's doing now. And, of course, you can Google anybody. And he found out that Kevin got married in 2010, supply chain graduate, and is working at United Technologies in Connecticut. Wait till I tell Kugler, because Kugler says, you'll never bring this up on your show. I said, I might. I didn't realize it would be so soon because you played the Boise State highlight to connect. Idaho and Penn State. There you go. Well done. Very well done. Penn State will play Iowa tonight. There is a question on whether Tyler Cook will play tonight for Iowa. He did hurt his ankle again in the victory over Ohio State. Iowa is a very good offensive team. They're not a great defensive team, but they are certainly a team that plays a lot harder than last year. And that's helped them. They got off to an 0-3 start in the conference, and a lot of people went, oh boy. And now they've won their last 3. What was interesting about their win over Northwestern is this. Their win at Northwestern was the first time in 12 road games where Iowa was not behind by 17 points or more. How about that? That is a stunning, mind-boggling stat. It's a stunning, mind-boggling stat that you'd go on the road and in each of 12 road games, spanning back obviously to last year, you were behind by 17 points or more. That's a wow. Good team, though. Playing well. Playing harder. You've got Tyler Cook can be a big-time player. Joe Wieskamp, the freshman, has been terrific for them. And a good all-around player. He's a good shooter, good rebounder, plays hard. And again, Wieskamp is one of those guys who grew up in Iowa and is his lifelong dream was to play Iowa basketball. Obviously, I've been doing this for not quite, but almost 40 years. 37 years of Penn State basketball. And no matter what has been done here, where are the guys whose lifelong dream has it been to play Penn State basketball? I mean, you do have some Division I players every once in a while between the Ohio border and southeastern Pennsylvania. But look, the vast majority of Division I talent is in that southeast corridor. That's why Pat Chambers has gone down there, because he knew he had to. What were his choices? All right, let's get into the transfer part for a moment, because obviously more names have been put in. And as I pointed out, now I don't know how many times I've said this, but I mean, I think you always have to repeat yourself on certain things, because the audience changes all the time. Just because you put your name in doesn't mean you're leaving. But I'm sure, let's be honest about it, you can make the safe assumption the vast majority of those who will put their name into the transfer database across the country, the vast majority are going to go someplace else. But it doesn't mean all of them. So it does put a head coach in a position at this time of the year to pick out a couple of guys and look at them and try to, quote, re-recruit them. Now, who might that be along the way? I mean, I'll start with this. I thought Ryan Snyder of Blue White Illustrated wrote a very thoughtful article about Lamont Wade. Did a good job of getting in, finding some contact points somewhere, and that would be a guy. Let's see. I mean, it was Ryan's opinion, and I don't know, because I have not talked to James Franklin. I haven't talked to Lamont Wade. I haven't talked to anybody. It was Ryan Snyder's opinion that Wade might be a 50-50 guy. Okay. All of these players that have put their name into the transfer portal here have put their names in, and the only starters they've lost that were scheduled to come back next year happen to be the 5 players that entered the NFL draft. Ryan Bates, Connor McGovern, Kevin Givens, Sharif Miller, Miles Sanders. Of those 5, the only one that did surprise me was Kevin Givens. But again, I'll be honest with you, I don't know Kevin Givens as well. My times talking to Kevin have been limited. John Franco coached him in Altoona. Any good read I have on him comes from John. John always talks to me about every time I see him about a lot of things. And then you look at the guys that have put their names in the transfer portal. I feel Lamont Wade is the kind of guy that can give you, well, I mean, he can fight for a starting job, but he's going to give you valuable depth. Juwan Johnson would. Look, Juwan Johnson's a hard worker. So what I always said about the difference between he and Irv Charles was that they both had great talent. In fact, Charles may have had more talent than Juwan, but Juwan always worked at his craft, and I think I said that on this show many times. And then there's and Lamont Wade. Lamont Wade is talented, but he got more snaps this past season on special teams than he did on defense. I mean, you're getting 4 to 8 or 9 snaps a game being the dime defensive back. And there were 2 moments this season that I think said a lot about where everybody was standing with this. And that's when Garrett Taylor had to sit out after a second-half targeting call, and Nick Scott had to sit out because of a second-half targeting call. And each time the answer was Jonathan Sutherland starting. So that brings us now to Aaron Monroe, who announced he is going to transfer. I think Aaron Monroe has a chance wherever he goes to be a good player. When he played for Penn State, I really liked him. I thought he played the run well. I thought he was good against the pass. I thought he played the run really well. I thought he was improving against the pass. He did not play the pass as well as the run, in my opinion. Aaron Monroe's biggest problem, though, as to what, quote, held him back is something he can't control, and that is he kept getting banged up all the time. Well, when you get banged up, what happens? It's not that you're missing games, you're missing practices. And when you're missing practices for extended periods of time, which happened to him several times in his career, you're not getting enough reps, and the door becomes open to somebody passing you out. And you can't control it. You're injured. You're hurt. But in the end, that does play a role. You may be a talented guy, but you don't have enough reps to have people to really trust where you are. I think wherever he goes, if he stays healthy, I think he'll play well. Danny Dalton. I think Danny Dalton is another guy whose talent I really like. Catches the ball well. Could be a better blocker, but catches the ball well. But same story with him. He'd get banged up here and there, and then he'd miss practices. And then all of a sudden he's sitting on the depth chart, and he's looking, and there's a true freshman who's lighting it up, playing as well as anybody you could possibly ask to play this position, and Pat Freiermuth. Nick Bowers finally got himself an injury-free year. And look how well he played this year. And then there's Jonathan Holland. Now suddenly you're sitting there, you're fourth. You know, these guys want to play, and I don't blame them. They want to play. Alex Gellerstadt. You know, it takes longer for linemen anyway. But Alex kind of has fallen, was playing in that a lot to the 2 to 3 area on the depth chart. You know, he's kept falling into that neighborhood there. And they keep bringing in other linemen. And you know, if you noticed a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about Bates and McGovern going, I mentioned how Mike Miranda had been playing, and Mike Miranda had put himself in a position where you felt like he had to play more because he had worked his way to that spot to play more. Now, he's not going to be Connor McGovern, but you know what? I think he's going to be a good player here. And it would be tough to keep him on the bench. Now, the tackle spot was a little bit different. So when I was talking about that, I talked about Rasheed Walker. I talked about the transfer from Lackawanna Community College, Wigan. And I talked about, you know, the fact that Des Holmes could play guard or tackle. I never brought up Alex. It's not that I don't like Alex. It's not that it's just, but he spent so much time between 2 and 3 and more 3 than 2 that he wasn't working his way up the depth chart. And these guys want to play. So all these guys that go, I completely understand the desire to want to play because I believe in the end that's what's driving certain things. I mean, Brandon Polk's going to be a fifth-year guy. Well, Brandon Polk was a DNP CD his last 4 games. Did not play, coach's decision. Okay. And you look at Dotson, you look at Shorter, you look at George, you look at Dunmore coming in, you look at Hamler, you look at Hippenhammer, Cam Sullivan-Brown. Suddenly the inn of quality receivers is getting crowded there. And it's not like these guys aren't hard workers. It's not like they aren't out there working hard and trying. They are. They are hard workers. But there also is a lot more talent in this program than before. And part of it is, not all, but part of it is every once in a while you run into a roadblock because misfortune hits you and you're out for a week here or a couple weeks there or maybe 3 or 4 weeks there, and all of a sudden that other talent is out there, and it turns out they've had the fortune of not being banged up, and you get passed. And in a couple of cases, not all, but in a couple of cases, that's what happened. And when you're talking about the level of talent Penn State has, that possibility is absolutely there. Then there's the next part. Let's talk about the quarterbacks part. Not at Penn State, but across the country. Brandon Wimbush knows right away. He looks at Ian Book and says, you know what? I'm not going to win the job there. That's been decided. So he goes to UCF. Jalen Hurts may have great personal confidence in his own ability, but you have to be smart enough to look at Tua Tagovailoa and go, okay, I'm not going to win that one. And then, so he picked Oklahoma today. And then there's Tate Martell. And just the mere thought that Justin Fields was going to be. And again, this is part of the other part that you have to bring into account here. Let's take Tate Martell for a moment. He's bold about, Fields coming here in the beginning. The one thing we don't know, his position coach was Ryan Day. We have no idea over the past 9 months between spring practice, preseason, in-season, what was said and not said to Tate Martell by Ryan Day. For all we know, it was all positive and glowing. Okay? For all we know, maybe there was some negativity in there. For all we know, there was a mixture of both. For all we know, he looked at Fields and said, I don't know if he can beat him out. Why are they bringing him in here? Or for all we know, he thought after going through the experience of having Ryan Day as his position coach, maybe he felt he needed to go someplace else. I don't know. But he ended up at Miami. All right, we'll take a break. Come back with more in a moment as we continue on News Radio 1070 WKOK, brought to you by Sunbury Motors.
Sunbury Motors Hyundai has the brand new Hyundai you deserve with savings of over $7,000. Buy a $25,000 2018 Santa Fe for only $18,259. That's a savings of over $7,000. A 2018 Hyundai Elantra is discounted to an unbelievable $14,810. Sunbury Motors Hyundai has a 2018 Santa Fe Sport that was $34,890 and now only $28,840. Hyundai comes with America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. No matter what size SUV you're looking for, Sunbury Motors has it. 2019 Hyundai Konas, only $23,210. 2019 Hyundai Tucson, only $26,110. 2019 Santa Fe's, only $26,775. And the 2019 Santa Fe XL starts under $30,000. Now is the time to get the new Hyundai you deserve from Sunbury Motors Hyundai in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury.
Jack Ham and I were talking about the transfers this morning, and it got to a point where, look, this all began October 15th, so this has only been in play for 3 months, literally 3 months. And players are now experiencing for the first time that kind of freedom. So you're going to see a lot of players attempt to take advantage of that freedom. Perfectly fine. That's why the rule was put in play. But Jack said, is there a deadline on any of this? I said, no. I said, it can happen at any time. But I am of the opinion that you will see players opting for the transfer database for the most part in January, late April, May, and then maybe at the end of August or possibly at the end of September. So why is that? January is obvious because that's the end of one semester and the beginning of the next. Okay. End of April into May, spring practice is over. You now have a better handle on where you think you stand. End of August is training camp, or could it be late September, early October? Why is that? Because of the 4-game rule. I think the 4-game rule does play a role in this. And one of the reasons I think the 4-game rule plays a role in this is that you have a lot of coaches getting some of the younger talent in that they feel they can trust, keeping them to 4 games or fewer, and they're making up, at times, the depth. So it does play a role, in my opinion. Because now you have, instead of looking at a player and saying, we're going to redshirt them unless it's absolutely necessary to play them, you're now finding that these players are filling in depth spots at certain times of the year And it also is causing the possibility that somebody who's been there longer but may not either have the talent yet or they have not fulfilled their talent yet, because everybody develops on their own clock. Now there's that fear they're getting passed out by said guy. Or you may be in a situation like take Jahan Dotson, where you need to get that guy, you got to play him. You have to play him. So he's going to play more than 4 games. So I'm wondering, because this is the first year for all of these items, the 4-game rule, the transfer database and so forth, what kind of role each is playing into the other.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Today's show brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Great product, wide variety of product, great sales staff. They think of you and your budget. And when it comes to service, top notch. Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Jalen Hurts made the announcement on the Players Tribune today that he will go to Oklahoma. So he becomes a 1-year transition for Lincoln Riley there. There is a quarterback that they have recruited that I believe Lincoln Riley is very high on, but he is not going to be an early entry. He's not going to come in until the end of June, early July. So Hurts will be able to transfer and play right away there, which means he'll be at spring practice, which will help him. We already know Brandon Wimbush is going to Central Florida, and we know that Tate Martell ended up at Miami. Martell, as of right now, will have to sit out a year. Wimbush has his degree, he can play right away. Hurts has his degree, he can play right away. There's been a lot of talk about the Penn State transfers. As I would say the vast majority of those across the country who have put their name into the transfer database will end up someplace else, the vast majority, but not all. You may see several players, after looking around, saying, you know what, my best situation is still back where I was. And with Penn State, I'll hold that out there. And in some cases, some coaches may have to, in some small way, re-recruit their guys, that they sit back and go, whoa, you're transferring? Now, I don't think, Penn State, James Franklin and his staff stay in close contact with these guys all the time. I don't really think there are a lot of surprises here for them. And again, you're talking about players who in their own right have talent, but at the same time, the talent level in the program has increased from the underclassmen. And sometimes you get and sometimes it may be a situation where you get banged up, you've had to miss some period of time and so forth, and in that process, if you're not practicing, you're not getting the reps, and the door is open to getting passed out. Again, that's not your fault. But again, the program has to keep moving forward. They can't wait for you either. All right. Tonight, Penn State, Iowa. At the Jordan Center, Chad Leistikow joins us from the Des Moines Register, who was actually here in State College. He'll be covering the game tonight. Chad, welcome. It's great to have you with us. We hope you're enjoying State College.
Doing well.
Hope you're enjoying State College. Let's see. Let's go it last year. It was, quote, an underachieving year. I really liked what I saw from the freshman group the first year. Then last year, It didn't quite go as well. What has changed for them in the dynamics of this team, or is it just as simple as getting a year older?
Well, that's certainly part of it. They were really young last year, even though it seemed like they were young 2 years ago when they almost made the NCAA tournament. They did have a first-team All-Big Ten senior in Peter Jock, and he kind of, took them into road environments and helped them out there. And I think they were just kind of lost last year without a true leader. And this year, they are a year older, but they really have spent a lot of time in the offseason focused on defense. Anybody who watched the Iowa-Penn State game here a year ago knows that Iowa pretty much played no defense. There was 3 Penn State dunks in 39 seconds, and that was kind of indicative of how one-sided that game was. I think it was 82-58.
they have been able to, as you mentioned, be much better defensively, not even close. Is this a team that's been able, has Fran mixed up some defenses along the way, played a little bit of zone, played some man, try to keep teams off balance? Has that been part of his plan?
It is, yeah. It's actually some fans don't like it that he switches defenses so much. And there is I think a reasonable explanation that why you wouldn't do that, because if you're not going to be really great at any of them, you're better to be great at one part of it than not great at any of it. So, but he has kind of mixed them up effectively, and they haven't. They've had good games and bad games. They do come in playing their two best defensive games of the season.
Right.
Coming in here, they held Northwestern to 63, and that was without their leading scorer, Tyler Cook. And then they held Ohio State on Saturday to 62 and won both games by 10 points.
You mentioned Tyler Cook. He put his name into the NBA draft to go through the process. When the process was over, he made the decision to return to Iowa, which I think everyone would agree was the right decision for him as a player. What has it meant to this team that he has been able to be out there and be as productive as he has been this season?
Well, he's been pretty dynamic when he plays. He did miss the Northwestern game, like I mentioned, and he may miss tonight's game. That would be a big loss for Iowa with an ankle injury. But he played against Ohio State, though, right? Yeah, but he got hurt. It was about 4 minutes to go. He turned his ankle pretty bad and did not return.
Okay.
So yeah, he's been deemed a game time decision for tonight. But in his last 10 games he has played, he's had at least 15 points and 5 rebounds. He's one of only 2 players in the country that can say that they've done that this year. So, yeah, he's a force inside. He draws a lot of fouls. That's one of the best things about him is he draws fouls and gets opponents in foul trouble. That's what Iowa did the last couple games.
And Iowa gets a lot to the free throw line, which really helps them. They're a team that has more free throws made than free throws attempted. It seems like they are a team that's part of their formula if they can get to the free throw line more often to the other team. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. They're actually number one in the country, I believe, in free throw makes. And so, that's a huge part of their game. And, I think they're number one in the country in free throw rate, the Ken Palm statistic. So it just tells you that that's what they do. They've got some length inside. They haven't really been shooting the three very well lately. So they have been kind of relying on that inside game and trying to draw fouls. Luka Garza is a really good big man who actually shoots really well from the line too. So it's kind of a unique combination.
I also think that he's become a better player along the line. Tell us a little bit about Joe Wieskamp.
Yeah, he's a really good freshman. He might be the third best player on the team already. He's the highest rated recruit that McCaffrey's ever had. He committed to Iowa as a freshman. I mean, he's from Iowa. Kind of always wanted to be a Hawkeye, so Iowa kind of got a break there. But yeah, he's about a 6'6" swingman who does a nice job getting offensive rebounds and putbacks. But he can also create his own shot. So he's going to be a guy I think people in the Big Ten will be sick of. 3 years from now, the Brian Cardinals of the world, the guys that never leave. I think he's kind of got that kind of tenacity to him too.
Which I think allows them to do something that he wants to do, and that's bring Nicholas Baer off the bench. What kind of energy does Baer bring to the floor, and do you agree he's more suited in that bench energy role?
I do, yeah, and I think Nicholas, he does bring a lot of energy. He brings it in spurts. He gets fatigued pretty quickly, so he can't play 30 minutes a game the pace he plays because he goes all out when he's out there. But he's a 6'7". He doesn't look like he'd be a great player, but he gets steals, he gets blocks, he kind of does some dirty work. He'll get you an offensive rebound here and there. But I will say this: if Tyler Cook does not go tonight, I think he probably will be in the starting lineup in Cook's place, just because they'd be running low on big men then in that case.
What kind of season has Jordy Bohannon had?
Yeah, interesting. He is probably down in scoring. He isn't shooting as much, and that's a big a difference from the past. You typically would see him shoot, 10, 11 three-pointers in a game and probably make 4 or 5 of them. But now he's kind of dialed it back with more scoring options around him. And, he's having a solid season. He's probably not he's not going to be, considered a great defender. So a lot of times teams will kind of go after him on the defensive end of the floor. So, but he's a real solid player. I think an underappreciated player, even among the Iowa fans.
Chad, you mentioned down among big men. Part of this, too, is Cordell Pemsl getting hurt and being out for the year. Only played a couple games. And Jack Nunge being redshirted right now. Yeah. What's been the domino of, Nunge was playing, Pemsl was not. Was there any temptation to play Nunge because of Pemsl's injury?
Right, yeah, that was a question that came up pretty early on, and they were pretty. Fran McCaffrey was pretty steadfast on that Nunge needed the redshirt year. He started and played quite a bit as a true freshman last year. He's a 6'11" guy that can shoot from the outside. Probably needed to add some bulk, and the door is completely shut on that now because he actually suffered an injury where he's going to be out for the year anyway, Nunge. So, I was just doesn't have that many options right now on the interior.
Right, Ryan Kriener would be one, right? Yes,
he's 6'9". He's longest wingspan on the team. He's about 255, and wingspan's about 7'4". So he's kind of hit or miss in these games. I mean, sometimes he's really good. Sometimes you kind of wonder what he's thinking out there. So but he's a guy that plays hard. He actually gives them some grit on defense. I think that's been one of the big differences. You actually kind of plug him in and take Nunge out. Nunge was a little bit more. Just didn't have that girth and bulk for the Big Ten yet. And Kriener kind of brings that. He's just a big, wide body who's kind of intense and kind of nasty inside. But like I said, if he could have, 16 points tonight, he could have 2. You just never know with him.
If I recall, Iowa got off to an 0-3 start in the conference. What was the mood considering how last year turned out, and how has that changed over the last 3 conference games?
Yeah, great question, because you hit the nail on the head. The Iowa fan base was really frustrated, antsy, sick of it. When they dropped to 0-3, they didn't even hardly show up in that Purdue loss. Now that was the Tyler Trent game, so there was a lot of emotion in that building.
Right, yeah.
And they got completely blown out. It wasn't even. I mean, I think the final margin may have been 16, but it wasn't even close to that. And it extended an amazing stat that was the 11th straight Big Ten road game that Iowa had trailed a game by at least 17 points.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah, and they finally put that to an end at Northwestern the other day. So, this has not been a good road team. So it'll be interesting to see what happens tonight based off all that because suddenly now people are excited. I mean, the Hawkeyes are ranked. I think their net rankings are about right around 30, which is a good number.
Yep.
At this point in the season. They've got 14 wins as a team already, and they had 14 total all last year. I think they went 11-0 in the non-conference with some pretty solid wins in there. Iowa State, UConn, Oregon, Pittsburgh might end up being a decent win. So
right.
They've at least got that resume built. Now the question is, can they get to 9 or 10 conference wins?
And what have your thoughts been when you've had a chance to glance at Penn State?
Yeah, it looks like they have a good starting 5 and then not much after that. Am I reading that correctly? Is that kind of the...
Yeah, I think it can be like their bench has only produced 2 points the last 2 games total.
Yeah. Well, that tells me that, if Iowa can get that foul trouble, they've gotten opponents in foul trouble all year long. If they can kind of repeat that formula, they'll have a good chance. I did see Penn State's actually favored tonight, so that tells me that odds makers think that the Nittany Lions are better than people realize and maybe ready for a bounce back.
We'll find out starting at 7 tonight. Chad, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it on game day you join us.
Yeah, absolutely. I had good questions. I enjoyed it thoroughly, so thank you.
Chad Leistikow joining us from the Des Moines Register, and in fact, he's here in State College. Darrell Bevell's going to be the new offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. And, of course, Darrell Bevell, the former offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks, who didn't think Marshawn Lynch was the best option on the goal line against the Patriots.
What was brought up in the interview?
Well, Matt Patricia ought to know. He was defending it.
Could be the icebreaker in the interview.
Yeah. Hey, how you been? Boy, that play call there, Malcolm Butler is what a play. You ever think, you get by the goal line, you still think about Marshawn Lynch? Okay. All right. We'll come back, wrap it up in a moment on News Radio 1070 WKOK, brought to you by Sunbury Motors. Well, coaches today in college football have to start thinking about life in 3-year windows. I mean, it got to a point where we were so used to, in the 60s and into the early 70s, because of the freshman rule, you'd think about things in 3-year windows as sophomore, junior, senior. And then a lot of redshirting started taking place. Nebraska was one of the leaders in redshirting. Penn State certainly was one of the leaders in redshirting. And so everybody started thinking about college football in 4- and 5-year windows. Yes, you'd have your 4-year players, but you had a lot of guys going the 5-year route. And when they got to be redshirt seniors, that was considered to be some gold for you. You were experienced, older, been around the block. Nobody was leaving early for the NFL, so you had them. And there's no question that, I always hear, the coaches had all the power in college football. Well, that's because the rules allowed it to be that way. Because, and the rules, I always love when I hear somebody, there's usually the coaches had all the power in college football. Excuse me, here in the back, the draft rules all deal with the NFL Players Association and the NFL. It has nothing to do with college coaches. Now, what does involve college coaches where everything's changed is the transfer rules. Let's go back to basketball for a moment. Remember when Jared Udoff, and Penn State's playing Iowa tonight, Jared Udoff originally committed to play at Wisconsin for Bo Ryan. He sat out his freshman year to become a redshirt freshman the next year. So he's going to play 5 years. But then he decided after a year to transfer, and Bo Ryan initially put out a list of somewhere around 30 schools that he could not transfer. All the Big Ten schools, 13, all the ACC schools, because they play in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, believe it or not. And there were a couple of other schools he wouldn't let him transfer to. And Udoff was stuck in this no man's land. And I think that really brought out we have to give kids more latitude here because that was so restrictive. Well, in the end, Udoff was allowed to transfer. He did transfer within the conference. He went to Iowa, which happens to be his home state. And he played well. Now you have it, and this rule's only been in effect in college football since October 15th. But for the first time, players are exercising their ability to move around. Now, you still have the same rules in place in terms of when you're allowed to play. Tate Martell is going to have to sit out a year at Miami. But because they're both graduates, Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma and Brandon Wimbush at UCF will be able to play right away. A guy like Juwan Johnson can elect to come back to Penn State, play right away, or he can go someplace else and play right away because he already has his degree. So Juwan's in that position, which for him strategically is a good position. There are other guys that don't have the degree yet, and if they go someplace else, they are going to have to sit out unless they can get a waiver. But I would think January, late April, May, and maybe the other times, maybe the end of August, maybe at the beginning of October when somebody's exhausted 4 games, Those are about the times when I would expect to see names entering the transfer database. Now, that's a guess on my part. I'm trying to use the calendar and the logic of semesters, end of spring practice, end of training camp, end of first 4 games. I'm trying to use that logic because this rule's been in place for 3 months. 3 months and a day. But so far, for the most part, you're seeing guys move on that might not be starters at places.
You're listening to News Radio 1070 WKOK Sunbury. You can hear us anywhere in the world with the Sunbury Broadcasting Corporation app.